So we're back with Brain Posewitz, citizen activist, and Adam Weitzenfeld, who's with the Portland Animal Liberation Organization here in town. We're going to discuss a little bit about the Portland Aquarium. First, we'll just find out a little bit about our guests here, and then we'll move on to what the issue is at the Portland Aquarium. I talked to Brian first, so we'll talk a little bit about Brian. You told me a little bit about how you got interested in this. It was kind of like, it's just like the universe moved you into that position, it seemed like, when you were talking about.
Yeah, and as I was saying, I'm just sort of a citizen activist. I've been interested, I'd say for the last 5 or 10 years in animal welfare type issues. And I remember seeing an article about the Portland Aquarium opening in a former steakhouse out on McLaughlin Boulevard to the south of Milwaukee. I think it's a former Black Angus steakhouse. And I remember thinking to myself, boy, this really doesn't sound like a good deal. It's a private, for-profit aquarium. I think of aquariums as sort of government-run institutions or nonprofits that are there for education and animal rehabilitation, and it kind of spooked me that there was going to be this private, for-profit aquarium. And I think I maybe made a comment on the message board for the newspaper article and didn't think much more of it. And then I was down in the legislature this session in February for what they call Humane Lobby Day, which is, I'm a member of the Humane Society of the United States, and I was down lobbying my legislator, who is Carolyn Tomei, and coincidentally her district includes the area that this aquarium is in. And after I was down there lobbying on things like a dog tethering bill and a bill to limit leg hold traps and that kind of thing, I got contacted by her staff saying they'd heard from constituents with concerns about the Portland Aquarium and did I know anything about it. And that sort of got me looking into it again. And it's just been sort of one thing after another has kind of hit me in the face, and with this one thing after another, this has caused this issue to hit me in the face, and I've sort of gotten more and more involved in it.
Right. And Adam, you've been involved in, I know I videotaped you a while back at the circus protest, so you're involved in more of a wider aspect of the animal rights then.
Yes, I'm a member of Portland Animal Liberation. We are an all-volunteer grassroots organization that focuses on local and regional issues involving animal exploitation and ecological destruction. So we just started up in April 2013, so we've only been around for about 6 months. We're kind of covering a kind of absence of an animal rights campaign-focused organization in Portland. So
since In Defense of Animals is no longer around, didn't they fill that spot at one time?
Yeah, In Defense of Animals, they're still around. There's a few people who volunteer. They helped coordinate the first protest of the Portland Aquarium back in, I believe, September, right after the death logs had been released. There's also some other groups like Portland Animal Welfare Advocates. But Portland Animal Liberation is unique because we have a campaign focus. We also have an explicit animal rights message. We do not accept animals being held in confinement or being institutionally exploited for profit. And we're also against ecological destruction. And we also have a broader scope of really trying to build coalitions among movements and not just having a singular focus on animal issues.
Mm-hmm. So I know that when I got onto the internet, having to do with Portland Aquarium, there was a couple 1-minute clips or something from, I think it was Coin or KTU. So there has been an ongoing issue with that. And what exactly is that?
Well, let me just sort of give you some background about the place and sort of what's caused it to be in the news a little bit, if you don't mind. The aquarium in Portland is owned by an outfit called Portland Aquarium LLC, Limited Liability Company. And 2 of the members in that are brothers, Vince and Ammon Covino, C-O-V-I-N-O. They previously, or they were involved previously, and I think maybe Vince still is, in an aquarium in Idaho, and they're in the process of starting an aquarium down in Austin, Texas, which I think is also a private, for-profit type aquarium. And what's happened is a couple of things have happened to sort of bring this aquarium, this group of aquariums into the news. The main thing is that in February of 2013, Ammon Covino was indicted by a grand jury in Florida for violating federal law in that it was alleged he conspired to acquire sharks and rays for the Idaho Aquarium without getting the permits that were required from the state of Florida, and that was a violation of federal law. And so he was indicted for that crime and has subsequently pled guilty to that crime. And as I mentioned, he's one of the members of the LLC that runs the Portland Aquarium here. So that brought the issue into the news in part. And then in August, there was an article in the Oregonian because an employee or a former employee had given the paper something called a death log that documented the deaths of numerous animals at the aquarium. And so that also raised a whole bunch of issues about whether the animals at this private for-profit aquarium in a former steakhouse on McLaughlin Boulevard are being treated humanely. That's, I think, why it's come into the public limelight a little bit. And Adam may have something to add to that if I missed anything.
Feel free to jump in here.
Oh, I mean, there's a lot on the aquariums. The aquariums
in general,
themselves.
you mean?
Yeah, I guess there's 3 aquariums that people around the country have been opposing since February, or even longer than that, but really since February when the criminal charges against Ammon and Covino and Chris Conk who have now pled guilty to the charges that they had conspired to illegally traffic animals without permits, rays and sharks. And so many people in Boise, where the Idaho Aquarium is a nonprofit that was originally founded by the Covinos, they had those troubles. Then more troubles have surfaced in September when, after the death logs were released by a former employee at the Portland Aquarium, people in Idaho who had formerly worked at the Idaho Aquarium alleged that there was similar suspicious activity, such as exclusions of certain animals from the death logs and alleged unnecessary deaths that had occurred there. So the Idaho Humane Society is actually investigating that aquarium. And there's been some more controversy there. That aquarium also had puffins who really weren't supposed to be owned or basically living in that situation because they didn't have the permits for migratory birds. Second, they didn't have the proper enclosures. Third, they were letting people feed the birds, which is against laws even if you do have a permit. So they confiscated those birds. Even OSHA went in to sort of investigate some concerns that people brought up about workplace safety. And then in September, right around the time when the OSHA investigation occurred in Idaho, you also had the city of Austin, where Vince Covino's new aquarium is being currently constructed. They had to suspend construction and move all the animals out of the building they were constructing for the aquarium or modifying because they didn't have the proper permits to basically hold the animals there at the time, as well as construct the structures to build the large tanks. So there's trouble in Austin too, and there's already been protests in Austin even before this aquarium is open because of what's happened in Idaho and because of what's been happening in Portland. And already Groupon and some other businesses have cut ties with the aquarium that they initially had, as well as the University of Texas.
I see. So you were telling me that there was a website that's dedicated to just those 3 aquariums, the Covino Aquariums?
Yes, there's a website that was put up by activists around the country called freethesea.org. It's part of a broader movement to close Covino Aquariums, at least those that are currently kind of directed and owned by the Covinos and in which they profit off of in Portland and Austin, and any potential aquariums they may open in the future.
I see, we've got it up there, Free the Sea. I think I might have misspelled Covino there. It's C-O-V-I-N-O, but they get the point. Well, it seems to me that this is something that it's not we can get into the whole idea of keeping animals in zoos or aquariums. I hope to touch on that in a while. But this is a specific group of people who are conducting themselves outside the law, basically, is what.
Well, and I think we have to be real careful about how exactly we phrase that, because I think they've structured it in a way where not necessarily the same people are involved in each thing. And what I can say is that on the Secretary of State records for the Portland Aquarium, it's registered to an LLC in which Vince and Ammon Covino are members of the LLC, and Ammon Covino pled guilty to that federal charge that we were talking about, and exactly how things are structured in Austin and how things are structured in Idaho. I can't say I have all the precise details on that. I think the Covino family in general we can say fairly is connected with, or has been connected in the past at least, with the Idaho Aquarium, and also with
different states might have different laws.
With the true, yeah. And so, and I just, I kind of wanted to make the point that I think here in Portland, I would say we're sort of in the early stages of trying to kind of pull people together who are concerned about the Portland Aquarium in particular, and also the other private for-profit aquariums. And it's I would say it's sort of a coalition of people coming from different places. For example, we have Adam and his group, Portland Animal Liberation. I'm really just a citizen activist. I'm not an employee or anything of an animal rights group or an animal welfare group. And there are people from sort of coming from different places philosophically that I think are kind of unifying around the concerns about this private for-profit aquarium, and in particular with concerns about are the animals being treated humanely. Even people who might not necessarily be completely opposed to all aquariums. So.
Right, there's that too. So, and you mentioned death logs, Adam. I can guess what that means. I mean, they got to keep a running tab of animals that they have and animals that have passed on, and these are generally kept within their organization. But somebody, kind of a Snowden-like thing, kind of kicked them out, and once that got out, is that when the local media, what is it, Channel 2 or whatever, is that when they jumped on the story?
Yeah, the Oregonian in Portland and I think the Idaho Statesman in Boise, those have been the two main papers that have been reporting on what's been going on. With the death logs in Portland back in August, a former employee had leaked those. And there were 200 deaths reported, I think, between the months of February and May, which is a very high number of deaths for the number of animals they had. It's something like an 8% mortality rate, which is 8 times higher than the average that an aquarium usually has. So that was within a period of 3 months, and within 6 months of the aquarium opening. So this happened pretty soon after the aquarium opened. Also, one of the original directors of the aquarium, who had 25 years of experience with marine animals, or at least that type of industry, left the aquarium, reportedly out of concerns for animal welfare. And again, you see employees at the Portland Aquarium and at the Idaho Aquarium who have left, or even some who still work there who are not happy at how these places are run.
Mm-hmm.
They do not believe that the places, these institutions, have enough funds or have the interest in really putting animal welfare first. If you really look at the Portland model, I mean, really it's like a petting zoo where you have a bunch of wild animals stuck in unnaturally small spaces, animals who would otherwise navigate miles maybe in a day, stuck in like a bathtub for their entire lives. And then not only that, but people are allowed to touch them without the animal's consent or any type of consideration for them. You can there's a video at one of the aquariums of a child even falling into one of the tanks with the sharks and the rays because it's so low.
Whoa.
And I've read kind of reviews of the aquarium. If you go to Yelp, a lot of concerned citizens in Portland aren't very happy with how the animals are treated. They just go in there and they say, hey, this place doesn't feel good. Like, I have a bad feeling about this. Mm-hmm. So you can see that reflected in people who otherwise don't have an animal rights position, who aren't necessarily concerned with the exploitation of animals, but they do care about the animals. They do care about their children's experiences and what their children are, taking away from that experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, that reminds me of a program that was just on the CNN and on and on. They've been playing the heck out of it, as well they should, and because of the movie Blackfish, and so they had the CNN has done a documentary, and they had a couple crossfire coverage and all that, and it led up to when there was a young woman that was killed, and I think that same fish is killed fish. They call whales fish. I don't know.
I think they're
but,
mammals technically, but
yeah, the orcas, and we talked about that briefly. That was that this is an important, a timely thing that this is coming up right now, and what made me think of this is you mentioned the animals that had been killed. Obviously, they probably don't have that type of setup there where they have a killer whale. But either one of you familiar with what animals they keep and what animals that had been dying?
Yeah, well, this is interesting and a good point too. And I've been to the aquarium. I wanted to see for myself what it looked like, and you're right. They definitely don't have animals that I would expect to be killing anybody. And I would say mostly what they have are what you would think of in an aquarium, things like fish and rays and eels and jellyfish and that kind of thing. But it was interesting to me in that a substantial number of the animals there are actually reptiles, and there's lizards and snakes and that kind of thing, and they've got birds. As I understand it, these birds are called lorikeets, and so aquarium is almost a little bit of a misnomer. It does, when you go in there, sort of feel more like just a eclectic roadside zoo of kind of whatever they can get their hands on.
Like it used to be along Road 66.
Yeah, right.
Years ago.
Right.
Yeah, I can see that. And so what exactly do you want to happen, Adam? I mean, your organization has been protesting it. I think there was a protest last month, and I think that Brian's been involved in that too.
Yeah, and I would say the protests are not just protests by Portland Animal Liberation, but protests by all concerned citizens. I think the first one was orchestrated by a person who started the Boycott Portland Aquarium webpage, and then the second one I think was Portland Animal Liberation, but also some other groups, Portland Animal Welfare Advocates, and just non-aligned citizens kind of thing. So,
well, you don't have to have necessarily a demand in mind, is what I'm thinking. You could be just educating people about what's going on too. So I was just wondering what your position was with that organization.
Yeah, I mean, Portland Animal Liberation, as like an abolitionist organization that's opposed to animal exploitation and the commodification of animals, we would like to see the aquarium close down. We would like to see some other business take place of that organization. We don't feel like sentient beings who are taken out of the wild, who are bred to be in small tanks their entire lives, we don't feel like that's a respectful existence for those animals. So, we'd prefer for people to, go kayaking, see the animals in the wild where they belong, where they flourish. Check out, OMSI if you want to learn more about science. But, this aquarium isn't a place where people are really going to learn about animals and science. It's where they're going to more or less learn that animals are our property and we're entitled to do and look at their bodies however we want. And so, that's, our position, but, we are, as an organization, we are happy to work with others who don't necessarily have that same strong position we do. There are many people, such as the Boycott Portland Aquarium page, the Boycott Idaho Aquarium page, Idahoans Against the Idaho Aquarium, Boycott Austin Aquarium.
Those Facebook?
They're Facebook pages. There's over 2,000 people who are following all those pages. And most of them, they're not opposed to animals in captivity. They say themselves, hey, they'd go to another aquarium. So, we're not on the same page there, but I think even all of them, they're on the same page when it comes down to they don't trust these Covino-founded aquariums, and they'd like to see them closed as well. The Boycott Portland Aquarium page was started up in February, even before the criminal charges occurred in Idaho. So like a week before those even occurred. So even before there's all this bad publicity, a mother with 2 children from the Portland-Milwaukee area had started that page. So the whole movement to boycott and close these places down initially was started by people who had very little experience with animal rights activism. Mm-hmm. So this is an issue that one of the reasons there is the site that exists now, freethesea.org, is that it's really not our ownership as Portland Animal Liberation. That page was created so that anyone who, from any type of position, who's unsatisfied with how the animals are being treated at these aquariums, that they can join under closed Covino Aquariums and work together.
Well, Brian, since you're not necessarily affiliated with any organization, how do you feel about that, about aquariums in general?
Yeah, and just for clarification, I participate in the group called Portland Animal Welfare Advocates. I'm just a member. I'm also a member of I contribute regularly to the Oregon Humane Society, and I'm a member of what's called the Humane Society of the United States. So, I'm familiar with the organizations and support several of them. And from a personal perspective, I don't really disagree with Adam. I don't like the idea that wild animals are confined in small cages and tanks for people to look at. But I also understand that a lot of people think that under the right circumstances, maybe that's okay. And so, I would say, personally, what would I like to see happen? I'd like to see these aquariums closed down, and I'd like to see these animals rehomed in some way, either to refuge type facilities, or I don't know if any of them could be released into the wild or not, but I'd like to see them rehomed personally. But if not, I think that we ought to at least be doing some things to make sure that the animals are treated humanely, that they have adequate space, adequate shelter, adequate whatever animals need, and so I guess those would be my goals. And I also think that long term, and hopefully this issue can get people together for more of a long term objective. I think there's a lot of need for more regulation in this area, particularly with respect to these aquaria type fish and with respect to reptiles, for whom there's really not a whole lot of protection right now.
Yeah, I was wondering about that protection that you mentioned. Are there government, state, or federal regulations or procedures in place for any of this?
Well, this gets a little complex, and I can give you just sort of a very broad brush overview. And so, sort of, if you talk about federal law to begin with, there's something called the Animal Welfare Act, which deals primarily with how animals in captivity get treated. However, it applies only to warm-blooded animals, so it would exclude the fish and the reptiles.
Reptiles, right?
Yeah. Then there are also some federal laws that require permits for certain types of animals, like migratory birds. You have to have a permit to hold a migratory bird in captivity, and for certain types of mammals. Then if we come down to the state level, there are some criminal statutes that make it unlawful to commit animal abuse or animal neglect, and those are defined in the statutes, and in terms of what constitutes abuse or neglect, it's probably too complex to get into here. But those are criminal statutes, and I think we didn't mention yet, but one of the things that's emerged in the news is that the Oregon Humane Society is doing an investigation related to the Portland Aquarium, and I think their investigation will be primarily under these state criminal statutes, as I understand it. Mm-hmm. Then, in addition to that, the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife has a series of regulations, and to summarize those, again in very, very broad strokes. If you want to take a wild animal out of the wild in Oregon, generally you need a permit. If you want to import a wild animal and keep it in captivity in Oregon, it sort of depends what kind of animal it is. And for a native species, there's a little more regulation than for a non-native species. And so for some species you need a permit, some species you don't. But basically what they have there, these non-native reptiles and these aquaria type fish, there really aren't any permit requirements. And they've talked to the state about acquiring some other species that would require permits, and as far as I know, those efforts have sort of not been pursued, or they've stalled out or something. They've talked about getting river otter, they've talked about getting puffins, they've talked about various kinds of migratory waterfowl species that would require permits, and as I understand it, the subjects have been broached, but there hasn't been a follow-through, or the efforts have stalled out. So that's I think generally a very big overview of the law.
Overview of that.
Okay.
But we talk about government enforcement. I mean, government procedures and regulations, but they all get down to what enforcement is going to be in place.
Yeah, and I would like to. There was one thing I forgot to add, which is that in the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife regulations, there is a requirement, a general overreaching requirement, that any wildlife held in captivity, whether a permit is required or not, must be treated in a humane manner. And so, whether that regulation is being satisfied here or not, I think is yet well, and it goes into a little detail here as well, but it still, as you say, remains a little subjective, and and I don't know whether down the road there's maybe some argument that regulation is not being satisfied here.
And then there's just like with everything else, how much effort and money is the government have to enforce these and to check them out. I don't know if either of you are aware of any of that, but it just seems to me that the work that you're doing is an important thing to do, at least from the standpoint of education, and I think that's what your protest that you think you said the last one in September was Portland Animal Liberation's protest there in September, that you
yes.
They weren't the only ones there, but you were the one that was organizing
well,
it.
In October 19th, we had we had organized a protest. It was more of an outreach event in front of the aquarium, so we handed out literature to people who were arriving and also leaving the aquarium, sort of on the sidewalk, since it's public property. Mm-hmm. And we were actually surprised by how much public support there was. There were people just coming down this road, and they're just honking their horns, and that was pretty frequent for people to honk their horns and give us the thumbs up. For the most part, we had very positive reception. People leaving kind of agree that they were concerned, and they were not going to come back and give them more money. And so there's also neighbors who expressed that they didn't really like the aquarium very much either. So it's not just animal rights activists. It's just the regular public who's just very suspicious of the Portland Aquarium, and especially their capacity to really treat and provide for their animals adequately.
Sure. Well, Portland is known as almost a dog lover capital of the country, and there's an awful lot of relationships and emotional relationships here with people and their pets. And once you establish that, it happened with me with dogs. Once you establish that, you don't look at other animals the same anymore. It seems to me anyway, and that might be where a lot of those thumbs up were coming from. They had pets, and they can identify with that, and hopefully that can continue. Well, is there any, before we get into the phone calls, we got about 15 minutes left, is either one of you involved in any organizing for a future protest, or how can people find out about future protests?
Well, I think we will be doing future protests or educational type events, and I think we've at least sort of started to set up a bit of a network among, for example, Adam and his group, and other people. A few people have contacted me because my name's been out there a little bit about this, and I think we're sort of starting to create a little bit of a list to sort of notify people of what's going on and when it occurs. And so people are welcome to contact me, and I can make sure they get an email notice of future events. And I don't know if Adam has other suggestions, but I'm creating a list of people who are concerned about this, and so that I can basically send out email notices when things happen.
Well, it's not up at the moment here, but we've had your email address up, just your name, Brain Posewitz at Comcast.net.
Right.
And if folks want to get involved through Portland Animal Liberation, you've got a website as well.
Yeah, we have a website, www.portlandanimalliberation.org. You can also find us on Facebook. So you can send us a message there if you'd like to contact us. Also Portland Animal Liberation at Gmail. But I'd recommend going to the Facebook page. We often have updates, and we'll also post events. And there is a larger event definitely in the planning within about a month from now. Within a month, possibly the Austin Aquarium will be opening. So that's going to be a big deal for the activists and citizens in Austin. Right now, the city of Austin's still not quite sure whether they're going to really allow the aquarium to be there. They issued a temporary permit to the Covinos to continue building, but they haven't made like kind of an official decision to give them a full permit. So yeah, there's that. There's also the Eamon and Chris Conk are going to be sentenced in Florida in about a month from now. And it's going to be the Portland Aquarium's 1-year anniversary coming up. So, there's a lot of news kind of circulating around there, and we hope to.
Who are those two people?
There's Am Covino.
So the two people are being sentenced, you said?
Yeah, Am Covino, Vince Covino's brother, co-founder of the Portland Aquarium and Idaho Aquarium, as well as Chris Conk, who is also.
I missed what you were referring to there. I see.
The director, but yeah, they pled guilty in September to charges of like conspiracy.
Is this jail time charges?
Yeah, I don't recall right now the exact penalties, but it could be, potentially years in prison and thousands of dollars.
Oof.
Yeah.
Well, they're messing with something that I didn't realize it was that serious of an offense. Well, it seems really good that this is being done, and I really appreciate you folks coming on and talking about it. We got 12 minutes. We'll put up the phone number, I should say, and then if folks want to call in and talk about this, there it is, 4448-288-4448. And we'll see if anybody wants to call in. Has there been any issues with, I always thought Portland Aquarium, or aquarium in Oregon, I should say, was over at Newport Beach. There's a big aquarium over there. I have never heard anything about that one way or the other. Has there been any problems with that one? Anybody heard anything?
I'm not familiar with any, other than just the broad philosophical issue of holding wild animals in captivity. I certainly have never heard any allegations or complaints about inhumane treatment of animals.
Well, that's good to hear, because I don't necessarily advocate that we should keep animals for entertainment. It's almost like a slavery. And it's something that, as I get further and further down the road, I'm more and more against it. Whether it's zoos or circuses or all these other different places where we just treat them like we have dominion over them, like the Bible says. I think that needs to be revisited, and I think people are doing that, and not just in Boise and Portland and a place in Texas. That's a very progressive spot in the middle of a very red state. I'm glad to hear that something's going on over there. So your future plans are to organize ongoing. Oh, I see we have a phone call here. So we'll get the first caller on the air. First caller.
Hello.
Hello, you're on the air. Welcome to the program.
Yes. Good program as usual.
Oh, thank you.
I wanted to ask the two gentlemen there. Actually, the thought is quite simple itself. If there are initiatives such as trying to teach in schools something that approximately, I call it the psychology of animals or something like that, the book has developed in order to treat animals humanely, and the adverb humanely is meaningful there. It's something that's grown spontaneously. But I think it could be enhanced or increased by education at an early age. There will be a new avenue of teaching the psychology of animals, because animals have cognitive powers, as we all know, as well as emotions, as we all know. So if that could be made more formal, perhaps there could be a greater traction across the population at large. I will stop here, but I would like to hear your comment. Thank you.
He kind of faded in and out there a little bit.
I think I understood the question. As I understood it, he was basically saying, is there any effort to teach in the schools something related to the psychology of animals and to make people more aware of that there is such a thing as psychology of animals and animal emotions.
Very good idea.
Yeah, and I'm afraid to say that I'm not personally aware of what's going on in the schools in that regard. I do think it's a good point that the more you can sort of raise that issue in society, it's a good thing. And I also have to say I can't claim to be completely up to speed on the science in that area and the extent of of animal psychology and animal emotion. I just know that when I'm around them, they seem to display some kind of emotion to me. So hopefully that answers at least for me, the question.
Well, there's actually an organization, it's a national organization. There's a chapter in Portland called HEART. I don't want to mess up what the acronym stands for. But basically, it's a humane education organization.
They're going to come on next week, actually.
Oh, great! Yeah. And so, they work in schools. They work explicitly for humane education. I think they even are looking for volunteers if anyone wants to volunteer. So there are initiatives to educate children in school with humane education. They actually have like a 10-week curriculum, not to just focus on animals, but also environmental issues and human rights issues. And then at the end, they kind of connect all those to show that compassion and empathy are critical components to really fixing those issues, or at least being the spark that gets people motivated. There are initiatives like that. Something that we'd like to work on is, requesting that schools don't take their children there on field trips. Because as I said before, when we take our children to like aquariums and zoos, especially ones that aren't very, well run, what does that teach children? Like, you can have signs up there talking about how magnificent the animals are, how smart they are, but really, what are the children getting out of that when they just go there and the animal's just a complete object, just something to look at, and we expect the animal to look back at us and provide us with a nice experience, when in reality the animal's probably either oblivious to us or often pretty miserable. And so, we just don't think that's a very good opportunity for our children to learn about animals. We really want people to think about animals as being independent, conscious creatures. They have their own value, they have their own perceptions, they have their own experience, and have their own kind of matter of what's valuable to them and what's not. But so often we kind of force them into our world and kind of ignore how they think and how they feel. So we'd really like, if anyone wants to help us out, if you have children in school, you talk to your school district, ask them, not to have schools go there on a field trip.
I think it'd be a great step forward just to make it more common knowledge that they do think and that they do feel. Most people don't even consider that, part of the issue. Whoop. Was that a call, or was that? Nope. Okay, the phones are speaking back to us. What you're talking about, I was thinking as you were speaking that, people say, well, our kids got to have, a connection to the animals and to the wildlife. And, but, how much connection is it to an animal in a bathtub? I think that was the analogy you made. And I know what could people do what could, say, parents do or teachers do to foster this connection to the wild if they can't go to these places?
I mean, it's an interesting issue, and you always hear that sort of defense of zoos and aquariums.
That's why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah, that this is, if it weren't for zoos and aquariums, we wouldn't be able to, educate children about the animals and get them to care about animals and get them to care about conservation. And there may be some truth to that. I don't really know, but I do worry that what it teaches people is that it's okay to keep wild animals confined in unnatural settings. And it seems to me if you want to really connect your kids with nature and animals, you get them out in the wild and let them see these animals in their natural habitat, and that would be a far more valuable experience.
I'm sure you have an opinion on that as well.
So I mean, I think there's a lot could be said, but I think one point to make is that parents often want to yeah, find something that's entertaining. So as a default, they go to these places that, children are drawn towards animals. So what is it about animals that children are interested in? Well, I think it's kind of the otherness of the animals. There's that uncanniness that, on the one hand, animals resemble us, but yet they're different. And there's always kind of this abyss between our understanding of the other animal, because we don't share a language with them, so we can't really communicate. But, even when we, certain cultures interact with other cultures and they don't know their language, I guess historically maybe this did happen, where people imprison them and put them on display at world fairs with other animals. But, today we wouldn't find it acceptable for people just to, incarcerate other human beings from a different culture whose language we don't understand and start touching them whenever they want to. It'd be something really insulting about that, rather than really trying to listen. So, and beyond that, in regards to relating to animals, people forget or just don't care that there's tons of animals in urban areas or even rural areas that we can interact with. But we're drawn to these charismatic megafauna, as they call them, these really large animals, which may make some sense in terms of we evolved on the savanna, so yeah, we're going to be attracted toward large savanna animals we hunted or existed with for thousands or millions of years. But by focusing on charismatic large trees and animals, we really forget about the value and the beauty of the animals and plants and other living beings who are in our backyards. And so it's the only ones that have any value to us are the ones that are the most epic. And it just seems like our culture and society tends to just really value and want to have these giant epic experiences, while not really paying attention to all the present moments of just the beauty of a bird sitting on a tree and chirping, and what can a child learn from that? Just being outside, having access to outside, having the patience and the cultivation of that type of mindfulness of everything that's going on. There's a way that child might take up conservation in their own backyard and help animals. There's no need to force animals from wild areas all across the world and then combine them into little spaces where we wouldn't have to question, is an elephant or a shark that's just moving around in circles all day, is that still an elephant or a shark outside of their ecological and evolutionary context?
It's an artificial elephant and shark as far as their behavior. What you're saying is true, because I don't know how it happened, but I somehow got on a list of emails. I get emails once in a while that will say how to draw birds into your backyard, how to draw butterflies into your backyard, and all the information is out there. Well, people can, like you say, turn however small or however large your yard is. You can grow vegetables in it. You can draw animals in there. You can have rather than synthetic, you can have an actual, real ecosystem, no matter how big or how small it is. And I see we're down to exactly a minute, so I'll let Brian. You want to finish it off here? Let folks know what it's about.
Well, I guess I would just say that I hope more people become interested in this issue and concerned for the welfare of the animals at the Portland Aquarium, and that people from different perspectives who sort of share that concern can come together and hopefully do something to either close this place and rehome the animals, or make it genuinely a humane place for animals.
All right. Well, thank you both for coming on the program. Also, before I forget, I want to thank the crew, thank our caller, and remember the websites that we talked about. We got 20 seconds. freethesea.org, which is information on these 3 aquariums that are running into some rough water, and there's portlandanimalliberation.org, and you can also get hold of Brain Posewitz, Posewitz, at Comcast.net, and that's it for tonight. Thanks for tuning in.